I don't like to date my shows, but here on Supercars Today TV, which you should be liking and subscribing, and if you haven't, shame on you, but you're going to enjoy this next guest. Been a friend of mine forever. He and I met at Martinsville in 1991 working for Winston Cup Grand National. What was it back then? Grand National or Winston Cup?
Back then it'd be Winston Cup scene.
When I got stuck in the mud, and he said, "Who's the a-hole that got stuck in the mud?" That would be me, as we were doing our photo meeting. But from then on out, been a big help to me. Bryan Hallman, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
First off, the reason Bryan is on the show is I was going to tease him and say confessions of a NASCAR photographer, but you know, like taxi cab confessions. But and I know you're not too big on highlighting media, and I don't blame you, because we're there to cover things instead of being covered. But I thought in this instance that it'd be good to talk to you, because you and I have seen so much. You've seen way more than I have. I mean, almost 30 years of covering the sport. I mean, you got so many awards, you ran out of space on your shelf, you know, for the shots you had. But how'd you get into this?
I was a race fan first. Growing up in North Carolina, my dad was a race fan. Went to some of the first races at Darlington. And that's back when you take the pickup truck, build a scaffold on it, camp out in the infield.
Which you can't do anymore.
Exactly, for the weekend. So I grew up with it. I grew up with it on the radio. So Sunday afternoons,
Universal and MRN, yeah.
radio would be on, listening to the race call. Didn't have it on TV. Wild World Sports a couple of weeks later.
Not even down here in North Carolina it wasn't on TV.
Here. And so I just grew up with it. And I went to my first race when I was 11 years old.
Tell me about that day.
1974 World 600.
Wow.
I was a Richard Petty fan.
My man.
And the biggest thing I remember was begging for a Richard Petty hat. They glow red and blue. The classic hat. Didn't get one.
Oh.
And then
Dad.
My 11-year-old self was crushed when David Pearson beat Richard Petty for the win.
Was that the fall race or was that the spring
was
race?
600.
I'm sorry, you said
Yep.
that. Yep.
And so after that, we would go to one race a year. So,
living in southwestern North Carolina and only one race a year?
Would you want to take a 12-year-old to a racetrack?
Well, my dad was taking me at 6.
So
wow.
The next year, I think we went to North Wilkesboro. The next year, we went to the 500 in the fall at Charlotte. The next year, we go to Wilkesboro. And then as soon as I was able to, I literally had to start sneaking off to go to the races. Well, you know, we got our driver's license at 16.
Yep.
And I wanted to go to the racetrack. Well, Mom and Dad didn't want me going to the racetrack by myself. And so I would tell them I was going somewhere else, and you could buy a ticket at Wilkesboro at the gate on race day. So Wilkesboro was about 2 hours up the road. So I'm going to be gone for the day. Drive to Wilkesboro, watch the race, come back home. They never knew.
Were you thinking yet of being involved in media or taking pictures yet? Or, I mean, were you in the stands, you know, okay, I got this little camera, I got this big, what were you doing at that time?
Yeah, later on I did. I grew up looking at, you know, Stock Car Racing magazine. Had a subscription to Grand National scene since 1979.
Boy, we'd love to have those back, wouldn't we?
Yeah. And so I grew up reading it, looking at it. And for whatever reason, I also looked at the credits, the photo credits, the writing credits. And so a lot of the people that I got to be really good friends with were people whose work I admired before I got there.
Name some.
LaDon George, Jerry Haysler. I knew David Chobat a little bit. You knew him better than I did. Just people like that, John Talent, Jeff Robinson. And, you know, it's a privilege for me to be able to call them friends because they all helped me. They carried me some, gave me a few tips.
That's a balloon, folks, in case you're wondering. Where Bryan's, we'll get into that in a minute, where Bryan's birthday celebration.
But they all helped me. And so I always tried to pay that forward as I got more and more established.
When did you think that came? What, you know, so you would say you got established. I mean, you went from, a couple. Well, first off, your first connection in the media.
The first race I shot on credentials was in 1988. But as soon as I got out of high school, and since the area I'm in, we got Charlotte Speedway is 35 minutes from the house. Wilkesboro was 2 hours. Martinsville was 3 hours. Atlanta was 4 hours. Darlington was 2.5 hours.
You were right in the middle.
So I was doing 12 to 14 races a year sitting in the stands. And I did that from 1982 through 1989. And there was a little local paper. I think every little community used to have them. They don't have them anymore.
Don't have anymore.
And I started shooting some dirt track stuff for them. And I asked them if they were interested in any cup stuff. Of course, this is all from the grandstands. And they said, yeah, we'll take it. And I said, can y'all get me credentialed or anything? Well, sure, we can try. And so they were the ones that got me credentialed for a couple of races. Some tracks wouldn't give them credentials, some would. And so Darlington, spring of '88, was my first credentialed race.
Remember who won that race?
Lake Speed.
Yes, sir. Good
And
memory.
so at that point, before that, I'd sent some stuff to David Chobat at Scene that I'd shot from the stands. And I told him I'd like to shoot. Never heard back from him. And so I had to work my own way. And then started doing races with credentials. You get some access. You get better pictures than race cars with fence in the way from the stands. And so Scene had a editorial change, photo editor change from, I believe, Don Grassman to Cindy
about
Karen.
that time, yeah.
And since it was a new photo editor, I sent in a
try it
letter.
again, right?
I can do 12 to 14 races a year. You don't have to pay me the first year. I'll shoot and we'll go from there. And so Cindy accepted. And they gave me, I think my initial schedule was for 8 races. My first race for Scene was the Spring Bristol race of 1990.
Okay.
Which, I'll ask you if you remember what happened that weekend.
I do.
Okay.
That was the Davey Allison, Mark Martin come to the line.
Well, about the day before.
Oh, is that when Mark Martin pulled
Michael Waltrip's
crash? Yes.
That was my first race for Scene.
Wow.
Okay. That day, but I was on the other side. I was on the other side of the race.
Of course.
But so shot a couple races for them, and then they asked me if I wanted to do more. So obviously I must have done something right, and so they bumped my schedule up. And then from then on, I basically got whatever races I wanted to shoot. And like I say, it's 12 to 14 a year. Two Bristols, 2 Martinsville, on and on. I could drive to them. They were within 4 hours.
Right. And you came cheap, like you said.
Yeah. Well, they started paying me the second year.
Paying you, right. Right. So, looking over the years, you and I started about the same time in the 80s. What would you say are the biggest changes you've seen from then until today? I mean, you're not...
On our side?
Yeah, on our side.
Access. There's less access now. It used to be if you didn't get in a stupid place at the racetrack, you could shoot from there. Now they won't even let you in places that are safe. They just... Access to drivers, crewmen. There were a whole lot less people. Back in those days, you knew all the drivers, you knew the crew chiefs,
and they cooperated.
And you knew the guys at the racetrack.
Yep.
They had, most of them would have 6 to 10 people, so you knew by name all the guys on the RCR crew. You knew all the guys on the, Hendricks guys, the 5 guys. You knew all those guys by name.
And they trusted you.
Yeah. The Scene shirt helped.
Yeah.
Because they knew we were legit. Nowadays, it's hard to get access. It's hard to get credentialed because you have to have a certain amount of people that look at your product.
But they're looking at more people sending them stuff.
Yeah. And so the biggest thing for me was getting hooked up with Scene when I did, because I was able to get with them before the sport blew up.
And you were in it. And
as it climbed.
Its peak.
Exactly. And I've always felt really privileged to have got to see it grow to the top that it was. And then I've got to see it come back down.
Right. So, we were talking about it earlier, Jeff Robinson, another scene photographer, and, we were talking about, some of our other friends of Don George, and, like I say, Jim Fluharty and Phil Cavalli. And you guys are, flying all over the country. You're not just driving now. You guys are,
That's when the sport blew up.
And they needed y'all.
It used to be you'd pick up local talent, or you'd have 2 photographers. Usually somebody from scene, whether it was David or Cindy, Ernie Mache, some of those guys, they would go.
David and Elmer and myself covered MIS all by ourselves. Try to do that nowadays.
But then they wanted more coverage.
More coverage.
So
can't miss anything.
A lot of times you'd have 6 or 7 people shooting. So.
And that's still hard because, again, like you say, Michael takes out the gate. You're on the other side. Somebody got it.
Yep.
But it's like, oh God, why do we have somebody over there?
Yeah.
And they need more, and you can't. Nothing against local guys, but you can't always count on local guys.
The other thing was, this is film days, so you're on deadline.
Days. Yep.
And
you're not emailing anything.
No, you couldn't.
Faxing was not. You really want to try that.
You couldn't get crazy shooting a lot of pictures. Right. We were deadline. We shot the race on Sunday. It got laid out on Monday, and where I live, it was in my mailbox on Wednesday.
Yeah, which is insane.
So you couldn't shoot 10 rolls of film,
right,
and then process it. If you turned in 10 rolls of film, they set it to the side.
Yeah.
Unless they knew you got something big.
Then they radioed in and said, "Hey, I got it."
Then they try to find it. Then they read you the riot act the next week.
Right.
And so I think it basically came down to they knew that most of us knew what we had to do. Some of the people you picked up local, they'd get a little trigger happy.
Yeah.
Because they didn't go to the race that much. And so they would just hammer down.
But couldn't that also be an editor, not picking on, any of the photo editors, but they could have probably, hey, this is what we need, calm down a little bit, we're on a deadline, we're on film, we got to develop this stuff. Because, talking to David, he'd put his camera equipment on one of the race haulers.
Yeah.
And he'd take his time getting home. But it'd be back either that night or Monday morning. Somebody from scenes at that shot. They bring it in. He had the college kids develop it all. They're looking at it. It's in the mail.
Yeah.
That was the deal. But yeah, a local guy, maybe the photo editor could have been, well, we need this, we need that. I mean, because when David and I and Elmer did, he didn't really assign us.
Yeah.
We just weren't wherever. But you guys had assignments.
We had assignments, and there was actually a pecking order to the assignments.
Yes, there was.
And so.
Yes, there was. But you could choose, like you said, you could choose. You always chose turn 2 at Talladega.
But I had to work up to it.
Sure.
And so, and I understood. I mean, I got some crappy shooting locations, but I had to prove myself. And so the guys that had been there before me, they got the good spots. I had to take what was left. The biggest thing that helped me was when Scene and Illustrated split. Illustrated got a dedicated photo crew of their own, because they would shoot a lot of feature stuff. So they really didn't have to have the race stuff. They needed pictures of
different style.
Henry Benfield.
Yeah.
They were going to do a feature on Henry Benfield. So they needed somebody that could shoot that. And so they took Elmer, they took Jeff Robinson, they took LaDon George, and they went to Illustrated. Well, that moved me up 3 rungs on the ladder right there.
And those are big shooters right there.
They are. Great shooters.
But turned you into a big shooter. Come on now, you got Mark Martin vertical,
yeah, but
on the Talladega
I don't have
That's incredible.
A lot of these guys have. Some of these
different type of shooting.
It is, and I've always preferred the action stuff. I like the on track. I've never been much of a headshot person. I've always liked the cars.
You're more of a photojournalist.
Yeah, I want to shoot the race itself. I don't care about shooting fans in the stands. I don't care about shooting billboards.
Banners.
I don't care about shooting grip and grin stuff. No.
Right. Grip and grin.
when they fire the cars up, I'm ready. That's what I want. And I will stay there till the end. I'm not coming in early. I'm not going to come in with 10 to go to shoot victory lane because something had happened on the track.
And plus somebody else is already there.
Somebody else is already there.
And I'm sure they would expect you to be there, especially now. If you were shooting nowadays, anything can happen now. I mean, 10 green-white checkers, you already got somebody in victory lane. You're still sitting on turn 2 waiting for Mark Martin to go vertical.
To me, the victory lane stuff is always the same. It's just a different person. They're going to get out of the car. They're going to stand here and do this.
The water's going to come flying. The water bottle's going to come flying.
And then they're going to be there for another 45 minutes.
Yeah.
So if I stay out in the corner, something leader gets dumped and I shoot it, I'm in good shape. I can still get back and shoot the winner with a trophy.
Because they'll be there.
They'll still be there.
Describe a typical day. Like, take me back to that day. I mentioned Mark Martin vertical on the back stretch of town. I believe it was 91.
That was
That
was a Monday.
Okay, right. Well, you're right. Take me through that day. You know, well,
Here's a typical day for us.
photo meeting.
We had photo meetings at 9 o'clock usually because the races start between 12 to 1. All the races start between 12 o'clock and 2
That
o'clock.
don't matter if we were in the middle of Alabama in July or whatever.
Yep. So 9 o'clock photo meeting. If there was anything that we needed to be looking for, we were told that. And then we were told where to shoot from. And then we were given some instruction as far as when we needed to, if anything needed to be done. Scene always had sidebars.
Yeah.
Your main story was on the winner. And then you'd always have a sidebar on second, third, fourth, and fifth. Or if somebody ran really good and fell out, you might do a sidebar on them. So you needed pictures of those people. So a lot of times we will be sent to the gas pumps with the top 5 were. If somebody led a bunch of laps, something happened, they were in the garage, so somebody needed to go to the garage and shoot them. But after the 9 o'clock meeting, usually you either found something to eat. I'd usually go out to the corner because I wanted my spot.
I was going to say, your spot.
I didn't want to take seconds or thirds. So I was usually always the first one in the corner I was going to shoot from. And everybody else that came out there could have what was on the other side of them. So that's what I did. Shoot the race, checkered flag, start heading in, turn in the film, and then find your way home.
Describe to me the patience that it takes. Because, I mean, there's, well, not necessarily at Talladega, but there could be some dull races where you're just like, oh my God, something going to happen. And I'm not saying that everything's got to be a wreck. You know, I mean, you get a 3 wide, sometimes a 4 wide, which is pretty hard to get. You know, it doesn't always happen. Well, Talladega does, but, you know, but then, you know, and I believe, which is the one you won the award for? Mark Martin or Schrader?
Schrader.
Okay. But still, a vertical shot of a race car, I mean, you're just holding the shutter down, and that's back in the days of film, but describe to me the patience it takes to sit there between the cautions. Oh my God, I gotta pee, or, and, you know, oh Jesus, it's getting hot, or oh, it's about to rain, you know.
For me, I always tried to look for things during the race. You look for team cars. Try to get the 2 team cars or the 3 team cars together. So you're constantly looking to see if this team car is catching this team car. Okay, he's going to catch them in a couple of laps, so they're behind this car. So when this car goes by, I'm looking for that shot. Late in the season, you know teams are going to switch drivers. So it was always good to have, if you could get the car the driver was going to, with his car he was in currently, they would use that. Mm-hmm. So always trying to think of something different to shoot. 2 wides, you just don't shoot every time a car got side by side. Try to have an angle to it that they would potentially use it.
The advent of radios is big. You know, to me, it's like, hey, we need to get this one, or hey, get that one, instead of I think they need that.
They'd also get you in trouble.
Oh, well, well, right. It could, right. But you're shooting now, and race is over. Then what do you do?
Head for the van. Go by the gas pumps, make a lap through the garage. They were always in a hurry to get the film back, to hustle it back to Charlotte. Sometimes they'd catch a flight with a team plane. Other times they'd drive it back. So you couldn't be slow getting back. But for me personally, I would cruise by the gas pumps, see if any of the top 5 is still there, and just shoot it again. If somebody else had probably already been there before me, but shoot it again. Cruise through the garage, see if anything's going on in the garage. Make a lap, don't see anything, head to the van and drop your film.
Showbet always told me, don't just take 1 shot, take at least 2.
I never shot a lot of film. I was always really careful because you had to pay for that.
Yeah, well, not you, but
no, we had to buy our own stuff.
Oh, is that right?
We bought our own film.
Wow.
We had to buy our film, A lot of times we'd go in together and buy what they used to call a brick of film and split the cost. But no, we bought our own film.
Interesting. Well, were your expenses taken care of, though? I mean,
here was the deal. I volunteered to work for free the first year because I was already traveling to those races anyway.
Yeah.
The biggest thing for me was place to stay. Talladega, you don't drive back and forth.
No.
And so that's one thing where the guys took me in. The regular scene guys were already there.
Yeah.
So we had to get our own rooms. Scene did not supply rooms.
Wow.
So these guys have been doing it for years.
Not even if you're going to the coast.
When we started doing that, they started getting rooms. That didn't happen until about 96. But like LaDon George, Elmer Capel, those guys, they already had their system in place. So when we'd go to Talladega, they already had a room set up. And so you just paid a percentage and slept on the floor.
Yeah.
But it's better than spending jacked up $200, $300 a night for a room if you could get it.
If you could get it, exactly. Or you're not staying in Anniston.
Yep.
Lovely, nice, safe city.
Yeah.
So when did you start realizing, it's not what it was. I don't really want to do this anymore. I mean, not to say you don't want to do it anymore, but you're not doing it anymore.
No.
When did it change for you?
COVID finished me off because they started limiting credentials.
Yeah. Pool photographers and reporters.
Yep. When Scene shut down, and a lot of the publications shut down, sent a lot of people home.
Yeah.
But then again, we didn't do it for a living. All of us had real jobs as well. And so,
hear that, kids who want to be in the media? A lot of us had real jobs.
So when Scene shut down, that took a lot of us out of the loop. I would start getting, I shot for Speedway Scene for a couple of races, and then they shut down. Then I started shooting some stuff for Fast Track. And the one that really saved me was Phil Cavelli. Phil Cavelli had left Scene, and he started his own business. He was doing commercial photography. And so he reached out to me, and so I would go to the track. He'd set me up credentials, and I would shoot stuff for him. Now, with him, I would have to make sure that I covered his drivers. He had a list of people, his commercial accounts. But then as far as the race itself, I could shoot whatever I wanted to, which I enjoyed the freedom. The only thing I had to make sure was that me and Phil didn't wind up in the same corner at the same time, since there were only
He's
two
the
of
boss,
us.
yeah. He's coming my way, maybe I move.
Yeah. And so I shot with Phil until COVID came out. And then I've done one race since then, and that was the ARCA weekend in Charlotte that you set me up with Brad Smith.
Yep.
And that was the last time I've been at a cup-size racetrack.
And, I mean, is it fair to say you miss it? I mean, I'm sure there's aspects of it, but
T. Taylor Warren, legend,
absolutely.
Hall of Fame photographer. T. Taylor would be sitting on pit wall when I first started, and I was fortunate to call T. Taylor friend. And he'd be sitting there, he'd be hot, he'd be sweaty, and I'd say, T, why are you still doing this? He goes, all my friends are out here. And, okay. And then I understood what he said later on. I always enjoyed the people. You sat here a little while ago and heard some of the stories.
Yep.
It
lived some of them too.
Yeah. It was the people.
Yeah.
And I still enjoyed going a couple of times a year. It got to be such a hassle with all the restrictions they started putting on us. But I did it because I like to keep my toe in the water. And I enjoyed getting to see it.
Because if you're gone for a little while,
you're done.
You're gone forever.
You're done. Yeah. And so I accepted the fact that I was done. Now, I really enjoy doing my vintage stuff through the archives. Mm-hmm. That is a lot of fun.
Go ahead and plug it. Go ahead.
No, I'm not. It's not necessarily plug, but that's how I still live it. If I didn't have that,
BHR, right? Or BRH?
BRH.
BRH Archives. Hear that, people? Okay.
If
He's not going to do it, I'll do it.
If I didn't have that, then I would be completely out. But with all the negatives and everything I have, and just scanning stuff up from, I think the earliest stuff I have is 1973.
Whoa.
And so I enjoy that. It's
You
the
got
history.
some of Pal Parker's. You got some of
I don't,
T-Taylor.
no, I don't have
or,
it. Nope.
Not Pal's. I'm sorry. Who did I mean?
I've got Bill Niven,
Yep. Yep.
Jerry Haslett,
Yep.
Mike Horn.
Of course. You got mine if you need it. You know that, and I got yours if I need it. I know that.
But they were really good photographers.
Yes.
There's no junk in there.
Any Howard O'Reilly?
No. No.
And then no David.
No David.
No. I know who's got that.
The legend of the lost David Chobat archive.
Yeah, we won't get into that. But we know. I know what you're saying. Do you see yourself shooting short track stuff one day? You're down there. You moved now to the Georgia-Florida line. Mike Horn's doing it. Any local stuff? Is that?
No, I did it up here in North Carolina. I enjoy shooting the car series. I did a lot with the UARA series when they were active, and really enjoyed that because that was like going back to the early days of Cup.
Yeah.
They were glad to see you
Glad
there.
to see you, yep.
They weren't there
Cooperative.
to harass you,
Right.
to tell you couldn't go somewhere. They were glad to see you, welcome you with open arms. What do you need? And so those were fun. And I was doing Greenville Pickens. I'd go to Caraway. Late models up at Martinsville is always a fun show. Things like that. And I really enjoyed that. But in moving to Georgia, I can't drive 6 hours to shoot an hour and 10-minute race.
Well, you got Jacksonville though. You got St. Augustine. You got, you know.
But they don't run the type of stuff that I like, the late models. I'm not a big dirt guy. I've shot a little bit, but I'm just not a big dirt guy. And the older I get and the more I stay away from it, the less I want to do it, because you go to a race in Georgia in July, the race might be at 8 o'clock, but you're out there at 2.
Right.
And so 95 degrees, 118% humidity.
Been driving home at night, and you're beat, and you're worn out, and sticky, sweaty, and
It's not fun anymore. Going to Hickory was fine. I love going to Hickory. Like I say, the local short tracks up here in the Charlotte area. But I can't do that anymore.
like Bob Keselowski told me once a couple years ago. He said, "Man, you're 20 years old. You work on the car all week. You drive all the way to the track. You're out there in the middle of the heat. You drive all the way home. You're at work the next day." He said, "Got in my 40s." He said, "I'm falling asleep pulling out of the driveway."
Yeah.
It's not necessarily. I'm not call us old, but it's a young man's game then.
If you do it for a living, like the guys do now, it's a job.
Yeah.
The one thing I was always happy with it was never a job for me. Because if it became a job, then it wasn't going to be as much fun.